All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming along. The title of this talk is Concept Watches, which is a little bit vague. But this is something that's appeared over the last sort of 10 years ago, where you see watches that are coming onto the market that are, that don't have the testing, the certainty that they would have had 25 or 30 years ago. There's something we see in the car industry, we see in other similar industries, but there's lots of, I think, in the watch industry, it's there's some questions to ask about it. I think it's a really interesting phenomenon, but it also shows how the creation of watch and the development of watch technology has changed out of sight. We've got some really interesting guys to help answer some of these questions. We'll talk a little bit. I've got some questions to throw at them. Hopefully have a little bit of discussion, and hopefully you can come in with your questions towards the end. To my left, Stefano Macaluso of Girard-Perregaux. We've got Peter Roberts, fabulous watchmaker who's from Bremont, and Stephen Holtzman from Maître du Temps. So we've got a hopefully quite interesting selection of views about this. What I want to do first, I think, is what do we all mean by what's a concept watch? Perhaps if I can start with you, Stefano.
Concept watch is something that, of course, is focused on a specific idea and in connection with maybe contemporary technology or a special concept connected with brand history, or but finally, I guess it's something that should be interesting for people looking for something very different. We saw for years, for ages, I would say, quite some brands more involved in mass productions, others in more sophisticated concepts. But I guess the demand for a very high level of personalization, even including mechanics, today is extremely strong. That's why so many brands and independent watchmakers are more and more involved in this kind of development.
Peter, have you got anything to add to this?
No, I agree with what Stefano says. I think when I first started in this business, it was quite a long time ago now, concept watches mainly seem to involve perhaps the application of art to watches. The technology wasn't really available at that time to do what we can do nowadays. The sort of micro-engineering nowadays allows even small companies tremendous scope to go in many, many different wild and wonderful ways. And I think a modern concept watch is something you make, you should be really wild, artistic, and really extreme. And hopefully you might find a customer out there who'll buy it off you, then you've hit the jackpot. But I think the customers have to be very friendly with the concept manufacturer, because these watches will be stretching technology, stretching abilities to the absolute maximum. And you will need to have a very friendly watchmaker for many, many years in the future to look after it for you. But they're great things. I think they should be wild, special, like the concept cars that we've had over the years, where the difference with us, I think, is that ours have to work. I have been involved with concept devices for cars, and they look fantastic in the motor show, but of course they don't work. Most of these cars, you can't drive them, you can't, they don't actually function, but they look fabulous. Whereas our devices, when we make them, they do really have to work. So that's a bit of a difference.
Yeah, for Maître du Temps, the idea of the concept or concept watch was really what we used as a basis for defining our DNA. And what started out as an idea to create a watch using rolling bars, well, it was kind of our base concept, ended up being one of the defining parts of our brand. So we used maybe the philosophy of a concept watch to establish the look and the feel of the brand. Insofar as the definition of a concept watch, it's, I think it's an opportunity to to step out of the box and do something different. And I think with the watch companies that work on concept watches, and a lot of times they step away from the DNA of the brand, and it gives them a chance to try something different.
Excellent. I think the thing we learn from that is actually Peter's point that these have to work out of the box. There's obviously clearly a risk in trying something as new as relying so heavily on rollers or perhaps a new material. What's happened over the last 10 or so years, that we can actually be certain enough, to put these watches actually out there, because my understanding is, this level of technological change in the past would be sort of hidden in the factory for 3 or 4 years before actually, getting out there. Anyone? Just Peter.
Yeah. Well, as I was saying before, they have to work, but the technology of recent years has allowed so much more precision, so much more reliable precision. The standard watch, the standard movements that are made in mass-produced factories nowadays are so good that we have to go somewhere else if we want to really change things. And this is what the concept watch is for. So it can be materials. Obviously we have the silicon is used now very much as an interesting material, and there's a long way to go on that. Although my own feeling is that eventually it will be the material for the mass-produced watch.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure it's the material for the ultra high-end watch. Although that's where it's coming out now. This is often the way these technologies go. The top-end watches will use a very, very expensive to produce material, do all the hard work, and then it will percolate down into the mass-produced watch. And then I think the top-end watch will possibly go back to what it was very good at before, which was the hand-finished, very fine material thing. But technology, I can't really emphasize so much how much technology, the manufacturing ability nowadays has changed in the last 20 years to allow these watches to be reliable.
I'd love to sort of digress on this for a little moment and ask Peter and Stefano. Silicon. Do you see silicon as having value with what you do with your brand?
In my point of view, absolutely yes, because then of course we'll see how the capacity in terms of production will change about that. But we have the chance to have this kind of material which is extremely stable, not influenced by magnetism, and finally not too fragile, so it's very reliable material. And also the performance in terms of are extremely constant. That's why. Of course, the big point today is what will be the capacity in terms of production, but I'm sure it will improve. For instance, as GR-Perregaux, a few years ago, we have introduced a new escapement.
Of course.
And that was theoretically was also possible with old technologies, but it was only the theory. Today, we can produce it only because the silicium. That's important. I would like to add another point about the new concept watches. Maybe what it changed, it's not only the technology we use to make new parts, but also the style of movement design has totally changed. In the past, watchmakers spent years in preparing with a plan made of paper, and was very complex to update very quickly the new technology. Today, with the new style of design, helping with very powerful software, it's also much easier and quicker to develop a new movement. That's why. Then, of course, it must be reliable, which is another story. But conceptually, we have opportunities in this field to develop much quicker than in the past.
Stephen, have you do you have a view on sort of silicon at Maître du Temps? No, this is not for you, I guess. Nevertheless, I mean, I know at Maître du Temps you're still pushing some technological boundaries, if not perhaps in the material, but in the sort of the machining technology you're using. I'm guessing there's sort of parts in those watches that you could not have even made 10 or 15 years ago. Perhaps could you expand on that a little?
Sure. At Maître du Temps, the concept was to use the rolling bars. So again, the whole basis for the DNA thus far has been to really work with rollers, and the different way of telling time when it's on a flat surface versus a round surface. It was an idea that the watchmakers, the independent watchmakers that we worked with, they had a lot of fun with it. And originally when we traveled around and met with different watchmakers and talked to them about the possibility of collaborating, they all liked the idea that we had a different idea or maybe a different way to have indicators. And what was interesting with regards to a concept watch is they all saw this as a challenge, and it was a way to maybe look at time differently or think of time differently or create some different indications or different challenges in making a watch. So that was I guess the fun part about meeting with the watchmakers and coming up with new ways of doing it, and just looking in their eyes and seeing their mind go when we said, hey, well, what can we do, on a roller at the top or in the middle or on the side, or what different indications can we can we work with, and it was kind of like showing them a picture and then just trying to see how they would interpret it. So
cool. To a certain extent, what you're saying then makes me think that sort of there's a sort of separation between ideas and sort of production knowledge, that perhaps wasn't quite so stark as before. And taking that and taking the idea that there is also, a customer base out there for, for this sort of watch, am I correct in assuming there is a much more adventurous customer, someone who's prepared to be more, to take more of a risk?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my personal opinion is that there are certain markets that are leaders in maybe trying new things, and a lot of brands believe that the Italian market is a market that if you can. The Italians seem to be first in many cases, and I think in making some style decisions, and it's a nice market to try, because if you can satisfy that market with style or with direction or with something different or stepping out of the box, a lot of times it's the next markets may follow that. So I believe that if you can satisfy the Italian market maybe with style and direction, and the Japanese market with quality and detail, the other markets tend to come behind.
But to stick with you, Steve, just to focus on the sort of the individual, are they people who, it's my impression they're people who are, prepared, as Peter was saying, to, have a relationship with you as a watchmaker or as a watch company, that's, a very different shape than you would have found in the past.
I think that the ultimate consumer wants to, I think it's one of the reasons the independent brands have been interesting in the past years, because the consumer wants to know about the watchmaker. They want to know who created it, and that direct relationship with the person, not the salesman, but or the image, but who's the guy, or who's the woman who created this watch. It helps establish some kind of personal connection, some emotion, a little feeling, And I mean, ultimately, if people buy a watch, they should put it on and feel good. And sometimes that personal connection with the creator is really, can be a big factor.
Stefano, can you add to this? Do you find with the Girard-Perregaux that you have this sort of very different type of customer?
But of course, we have some customers with a very direct connection with us, giving us also their impression and maybe sometimes also some idea. And of course, it follows also the general trend in doing that, because maybe collectors they've been involved in the market for many years. Today, realize that maybe already having 100 watches, they like to have something different. Okay.
Yeah.
You can maybe you can be crazy for a brand, for GP as well, for any other brands. But of course, sometimes you need something more unique. So that's why also concept watches are becoming stronger and stronger in the market, at least in terms of visibility. Is also because this need for uniqueness.
That's really cool. Peter, you must have found over the last couple of years that you've met far more end users of your work than you ever have in your previous sort of years.
Yes. I mean, it's a completely different world I live in now to, I've been doing this for over 40 years, and when I started as a watchmaker in Switzerland originally with Rolex in the early 70s, it was a very successful company, as Rolex always have been, but at the same time very serious, very manufacturing orientated and getting the numbers out, selling the watches. There was no real celebrity involved at all. I think the only person in those days who really wore a Rolex was Jackie Stewart, who was the world champion. He started the whole thing off, as far as Rolex were concerned, with wearing one of our watches. But other than that, it was very quiet and not much happened, and James Bond would wear his Rolex on the film because that's what he had in the book. And all the product placement hadn't started. But now the world I live in is completely different. It's very celebrity orientated. It's great fun. I can't believe it's happened, but it has. I've met some really interesting people. But you're quite right as far as the customer's concerned. With my life with Bremont, our customers really want to know about us. They want to know why we make these watches, what's the DNA of our watch, what do we think about. They want to speak to the actual people who've designed the watches. They want to know all these things. And I think one of the reasons this is really possible now is obviously the internet and the forums. We haven't mentioned forums, but there's a huge, unbelievable world. I'm sure most of you know all about it out there. I didn't realize that initially everything you say, do, or make, or say anything about now is scrutinized, looked at, worked out. So what I tend to do now is for thinking of the future of what we should do at Bremont, my next project or whatever, is just look on the forums, because all the things have been worked out by the chaps and girls out there. Excellent. They say what they want next. They say we want a GMT version of the so-and-so. Can we have one with yellow hands? Can we have this and that? And where we can, we do try and sort of follow these suggestions. But I think forums and internet information has made a huge difference to this industry.
Cool. I was going to ask concept watches, are they a good thing or a bad thing? But I just think they're an interesting thing, it seems. Hopefully you guys have got a few questions if you want to ask. Probably the easiest thing is if you shout them out and I'll repeat them for the benefit of the mic. So if anyone has got any questions that they're burning to ask, let rip now. He says, looking at acres of silence, never mind. But, the guys are here throughout the event. If questions pop up later, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.